What if the person working the hardest is the one falling furthest behind? Every morning he wakes before everyone else. While the world is still quiet, he is already moving. He works through lunch, stays late, sacrifices weekends, and tells himself that exhaustion is the price of success. He never complains. He never quits. And whenever things go wrong, he responds the same way: work harder. But somehow, his life keeps moving backward. The bills grow, opportunities disappear, his energy fades, and the results he wants seem to move further away. Then there is someone else. This person works fewer hours, takes breaks, and refuses to fill every minute with activity. Yet the results keep coming: more progress, better decisions, more freedom. That contrast is difficult to explain if you believe effort alone determines success. So ask yourself something uncomfortable. What if the quality you are proud of, your ability to work harder than everyone else, is the thing keeping you stuck? And if that is true, how long can you keep pushing before you realize the problem was never your effort? Daniel had never been afraid of hard work. He was the kind of person who woke before sunrise, answered messages before breakfast, and stayed awake long after everyone else had gone home. He was building a small business from nothing, and every task seemed to belong to him. He handled customers, packed orders, checked accounts, solved problems, cleaned up mistakes, and planned tomorrow before he had finished today. If someone offered help, Daniel usually smiled and said, "I've got it." He believed needing help meant he had not worked hard enough. That belief came from his father, a man who had spent his entire life working with his hands. Whenever Daniel felt tired or uncertain, he remembered something his father used to say: "A man who works hard can never lose." Daniel carried those words like a promise. So whenever sales slowed, he added another hour. Whenever a competitor moved ahead, he pushed himself harder. Whenever exhaustion appeared, he treated it like an excuse to defeat. But there was a problem Daniel could not explain. His business was moving, but it was barely growing. He was working more than ever, yet the numbers remained almost unchanged. His days became longer, but his freedom became smaller. Friends stopped inviting him out because they already knew he would say no. His family heard from him less. Even simple decisions began taking more energy. Still, Daniel looked at the hours he had worked and felt proud of surviving. At least he was trying. At least he was not quitting. And maybe that was exactly what made the real problem so difficult to see. Because when your identity is built around being the hardest worker in the room, how do you question the way you are working without feeling like you are questioning yourself? Marcus was not doing anything magical. At least, that was what Daniel told himself when he first noticed him. Marcus was around the same age, running a business not much different from Daniel's. He had similar resources, similar challenges, and no secret advantage Daniel could see. But there was one difference Daniel could not ignore. Marcus worked about 6 to 8 hours a day. Daniel worked 12 to 14. And somehow, Marcus was getting better results. Daniel handled everything himself. Marcus delegated routine tasks. Daniel waited for problems to appear before dealing with them. Marcus spent time planning so fewer problems appeared in the first place. Daniel kept adding more tasks to his schedule. Marcus kept asking which tasks were unnecessary. The more Daniel watched, the more confusing it became. Marcus seemed less tired. He had more time outside work. Yet his business was growing faster, his customers were happier, and his decisions seemed calmer. Daniel began comparing them constantly. If Marcus could accomplish more while working half as long, what did he understand that Daniel didn't? That question should have made Daniel examine his methods. Instead, it touched something deeper. Daniel had spent years believing that hard work was proof of character. If someone succeeded while working less, part of him felt that they simply weren't carrying the same weight. So he made the easiest conclusion. I just need to work harder. He added another hour to his mornings, another task to his evenings, another responsibility to his already crowded schedule. He didn't realize it yet, but Marcus wasn't beating him by working harder. He was playing a different game. And Daniel was about to discover just how expensive it could become when you respond to a broken strategy with more effort. Daniel responded to the pressure the only way he knew how. He added more hours. He started waking even earlier and going to bed later. His calendar became crowded with tasks, reminders, calls, and unfinished work carried into the next day. Whenever something went wrong, Daniel assumed the answer was more effort. If a customer complained, he handled it himself. If sales dropped, he worked longer. If a system failed, he stayed up fixing it instead of asking why it kept failing. Slowly, the cost began to appear. Less sleep made him impatient. Impatience led to rushed decisions. Rushed decisions created mistakes. Mistakes frustrated customers. Lost customers created financial pressure. And financial pressure convinced Daniel that he needed to work even more. The cycle fed itself. One evening, a friend told him, "You need to take a break." Daniel barely looked up. Breaks are for people who can afford them. He believed slowing down would mean weakness. Rest felt like falling behind. Every hour away from work seemed like an hour someone else was using to beat him. Then came the project that changed everything. Daniel had spent weeks preparing a major order for one of his most important customers. He checked it repeatedly, answered messages late into the night, and pushed himself through exhaustion. But he missed one small detail. A deadline was entered incorrectly. The order was delayed, the customer walked away, and Daniel lost money he desperately needed. There was no dramatic collapse, just silence. He sat alone, staring at the numbers, too tired to feel angry. For the first time, Daniel could not blame a lack of effort. He had given more than he thought he had. And still, it wasn't enough. His hands rested on the desk as one question finally broke through everything he believed. If I'm doing everything I can, why is everything still falling apart? The answer was closer than he realized. He had spent fighting problems with effort that he had forgotten to ask whether effort was solving. Maybe the problem was not his effort, but where he was putting it. After the failed project, Daniel finally admitted something he had avoided for years. He needed advice. Not another motivational speech, not another reminder to work harder, but someone who could see what he could not. He went to an older business owner named Samuel, a man who had spent decades watching people build businesses, destroy them, rebuild them, and repeat the same mistakes. Daniel explained everything. His long hours, his responsibilities, his customers, his mistakes, the money he had lost. Samuel listened without interrupting. Then he asked, "Walk me through a normal day." Daniel started listing everything he did. Samuel kept listening. When Daniel finished, Samuel asked a simple question. Which of those things actually creates results? Daniel opened his mouth, then stopped. He had never separated being busy from being useful. Samuel leaned back and said, "Imagine two people carrying water from a river to a village. One carries 10 buckets every hour. The other carries only 3. Who looks like the harder worker?" "The first," Daniel answered. "Probably, but what if his buckets are leaking?" Daniel became quiet. "He might carry 10 buckets," Samuel continued, "but if half the water disappears before he arrives, he has to keep making more trips. The second person carries only 3, but every bucket arrives full." Daniel suddenly understood. Samuel looked directly at him. "Your problem isn't that you're carrying too little water. Your problem is that your bucket is leaking." For years, Daniel had responded to every problem by increasing effort. But if the system itself was wasting his effort, working harder could never permanently fix it. The lesson was uncomfortable because it challenged something Daniel deeply valued. Hard work still mattered, but hard work pointed in the wrong direction was simply expensive motion. And for the first time, Daniel began asking a different question, not, "How much more can I do?" but, "What should I stop doing?" Daniel did not change everything overnight. That would have been another mistake, trying to fix his entire life with one burst of effort. Instead, he started with one uncomfortable habit. Before beginning a task, he asked, "What result will this actually create?" Some tasks suddenly looked very different. He discovered that hours spent answering every message personally produced little growth. Constantly checking small details made him feel productive, but rarely improved the business. He had been measuring his days by how exhausted he felt instead of what had actually changed because he worked. So he changed the measurement. At the end of each day, Daniel stopped asking, "How many hours did I work?" He asked, "What meaningful result did those hours produce?" Then he looked for leverage. He found repetitive tasks that could be simplified, automated, or handed to someone else. He created basic systems for orders, customer questions, and routine administration. At first, letting go felt uncomfortable. Daniel was used to believing that if he wasn't personally doing something, it wasn't being done properly. But slowly, the business stopped depending on his constant presence. Then came his hardest lesson: focus. Daniel had been trying to improve everything at once. Samuel helped him identify the few activities that actually drove most of his results. Daniel stopped chasing every opportunity and concentrated on the work that mattered most. The change was gradual. His days did not suddenly become easy, but they became clearer. After a few weeks, Daniel noticed he was finishing earlier. After a few months, he had more energy. He started having dinner with his family again. He could think without feeling constantly rushed. And something even more important happened. His decisions improved. Because he was no longer drowning in activity, he could finally see problems before they became emergencies. Several months later, his business was producing better results than it had during his longest working days. Daniel hadn't become less ambitious. He had finally learned where his ambition belonged. He still worked hard, but now his effort had direction, leverage, and focus. For the first time, Daniel wasn't trying to carry more water. He was fixing the bucket. Daniel's story feels personal because the mistake he made is not really about business. It is about the way many of us measure our own worth. We look at a full calendar and call it progress. We look at exhaustion and call it achievement. We count hours instead of outcomes, and we sometimes confuse persistence with effectiveness. But being busy is not the same as moving forward. Maybe you have spent an entire day answering messages, checking details, attending meetings, fixing small problems, and still gone to bed wondering what you actually accomplished. Maybe you keep adding effort because stopping to question your method feels dangerous. What if the answer is not more discipline? What if you need a better direction? That is the first lesson from Daniel. Before working harder, question the method. Look at the things you do repeatedly and ask yourself, why am I doing this manually? Is there a faster way? Can technology help? Can someone else handle it? Can I eliminate the task completely? These questions are not invitations to become lazy. They are invitations to become intentional. The second lesson is to measure results, not sacrifice. Working 12 hours does not automatically make a day productive. Sacrificing sleep, comfort, and personal time may feel noble, but sacrifice by itself does not create value. Instead, ask a harder question at the end of your day. What actually changed because I worked today? Did you solve an important problem, create something valuable, improve a system, strengthen a relationship, move a meaningful goal forward? That question separates activity from output. And once you start asking it, you may discover that some of the tasks consuming your energy are producing surprisingly little. The third lesson is one people often ignore. Rest and reflection are part of performance. When you are constantly exhausted, you do not simply lose energy. You lose perspective. It becomes harder to think strategically, notice opportunities, make good decisions, and solve problems creatively. Sometimes the most ambitious thing you can do is step away long enough to see what you could not see while running. Rest is not always the opposite of ambition. Sometimes it is what protects ambition from becoming self-destruction. The people who move forward are not always the people willing to suffer the most. Often they are the people willing to pause, question, adapt, and protect their energy for what truly matters every single day. So here is a simple challenge. For the next 7 days, choose one task that consumes a large amount of your time but produces relatively little value. Then ask 5 questions. Can you eliminate it, automate it, delegate it, simplify it, or redesign it? You do not need to transform your entire life this week. You only need to stop wasting effort in one place. Because the goal is not to work less simply for the sake of working less. The goal is to make every hour matter more. And if you remember nothing else from Daniel's story, remember this. When more effort keeps producing the same disappointing result, do not automatically blame yourself. Stop. Look at the system, find the leak. You may not need to carry more water. You may simply need to fix the leaking bucket. And now I want you to make this personal. Think about the one task that keeps stealing your time without giving much back. What will you eliminate, automate, delegate, simplify, or redesign? Write that task in the comments. Not because commenting magically changes anything, but because naming the problem is the first step toward changing the way you work. Work hard when hard work matters. But never let hard work become an excuse for refusing to think differently.